Let's focus on using the GOMAD framework as a coaching routeway. And let's just remind ourselves of what we call the classic coaching routeway. And what I mean by that is the easiest way to use the framework and ask questions around it to help another person. So for this, you might find it useful to actually print out or get a copy of the handout that's got 38 questions on it about the classic routeway. And I'll guide you around that and point out step by step as we go where we are on that handout. So let's start at the beginning. If you're going to coach somebody from the start, we always start stage one is with the internal triangle here. We call it the internal triangle because it's inside a person's head, self-belief. It's their heart, their desire, their passion, their reason why. And as yet, they haven't yet communicated their goal to anyone. So let's start with the goal. The easiest question, or a couple of questions to ask a person at the start of a coaching session is, what exactly is it you'd like to work on? Or what is it specifically you want to achieve? Okay? It's a what question, and we know it's about defining the goal. A big tip for you is I wouldn't actually ask a person, what is your goal? Because most people don't know what it is, and a lot of people don't really understand what a goal is. So take them through it step by step. If it's a SMART goal, and we identify that we can measure it quite easily in terms of a time, a cost, a quantity, or something measurable that will exist as evidence, there's basically only 3 or 4 questions to ask here. First question is, what is it specifically you want to achieve? Second question, by what date? Third question, how will you measure it on that date? And then the R bit for reason why or relevance, we can ask them a question, what's your strongest reason for wanting to achieve that? And notice I asked them for their strongest reason. This little link line here is what's called the strength line, rather than how strong their reason is. Well, because some people have more than one reason, and you want to help the person identify for themselves what's their strongest reason. And then it's the A of SMART, the achievability line. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how achievable is your goal? Now, if the number is 5 or more, you can proceed to step 2, which is over doing some possibility thinking. If it is a number of 4 or less, my tip for you is this. Either ask them to make their goal more achievable, perhaps reduce the measure or increase the time span. Or if the goal has to be achieved by that date, my suggestion would be initially to work on self-belief as a goal in its own right. Now that would be a qualitative goal. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where are they at the moment? And they say perhaps, for example, a 3. You might say, well, if you were to improve your self-belief beyond that, what's the date you want to improve it by and where do you want to be? And you would go through a qualitative goal defining method to actually do that. So if you're not sure, have a look in the coaching book or have a look at the other video about how to define qualitative goals. So just a quick recap so far. Get the goal clearly defined, check the strength of the reason why, their strongest reason why, and check on a scale of 1 to 10 where they are currently about achieving their goal. That's step 1. If you look at the questions on your handout, those are just the first 6 questions. Then if you look at question 7 right through to 23 inclusive, you'll see that all of those questions relate to possibilities. So stage 2 in the classic coaching routeway is to actually generate or identify as many possibilities as you can in the time available. Now, as a rough guide, rule of thumb, I would say that approximately 50% of my questions and 50% of the time is spent generating possibilities. So if I'm coaching somebody and I know that I've got half an hour, I will spend about 5 minutes doing the goal and about 15 minutes on possibilities. That leaves me 10 minutes at the end to do the prioritising and the action planning. So, step 2, generate possibilities. We go over here, and before we plan priorities, we do the first P, possibility thinking. And this is where I would use the elephant story, which is a separate video that you can remind yourself of, which is just the story to remind yourself of the 10 possibility thinking areas to ask questions around. So that's about the tasks. What possible tasks? And this is the task line here. What possible resources? What are the reasons for possibly involving others? Who could those people possibly be that could help you in some way? This is the buy-in line here, and it's two-way. So we could say, how could you possibly communicate your goal to these people? And how could you possibly gain the buy-in and influence those people to assist you with your goal? And then there are some questions about possible obstacles, possible risks, possible ways to overcome those obstacles, minimise the risks, and possible assumptions that they might be making, which can include hindering thoughts. So what you're really doing here is going backwards and forwards, just here, that's the possibility thinking part. Step 3 is really to identify the priorities. From all of those ideas, which you will hopefully have got the person you're coaching to write them down in their own handwriting so they can read them. And that also means that you keep the eye contact with the other person, and therefore you know when to ask their next question, which is normally when the pen stops moving or they look up at you like that and you follow the next question. So the next stage is this line here, the link between plan priorities and the defined goal. And this is what's called the importance line. So what you're really asking the person to do is to evaluate all those ideas and possibilities they've generated and to prioritise the ones that are most important in relation to their original goal. This is where if you've got a highlighter pen, use it, or encourage them to circle or asterisk or underline their priorities. And a quick tip here for you, never ever suggest how many ideas a person should highlight as priorities. The reason for that is if you suggest, say, 5 to them, they might not have 5. Or they might have 8 and you might be restricting them. So I always just say, just make a note for yourself and highlight the ones that are most important in relation to your goal. If they've got a lot of them, you might need to get them to prioritise their priorities. And then start with the first. And the question then is really saying, okay, out of all of those priorities, the top one, what are you going to do by when? And notice the questions now, there's no possibilities. They're really focusing the mind. What do you want to achieve by when? Go on to the next priority. Again, what is it that you want to achieve by when? If it's to do with a person, the question to focus their mind is, right, so who exactly are you going to involve? By when? Doing what? Okay, so you're starting to build an action plan. And you can spend as much time on that as you've got available and the person needs to actually build that action plan. So that is step 3 about identifying the priorities and building an action plan. And that goes from question 24 to question 29 on that handout. And by the way, excuse me, when you're doing that and going down that handout, I'm not saying that's a script that has to be read out there. They are just a good sequence of questions. Step 4 is called the check. And you go back, this is question 30 and 31, and you're checking the level of self-belief and has the person still got a strong enough reason why. So remind them that they're checking the self-belief of their original goal. So my question would be, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is low and 10 is high, what is now your current self-belief, having done some thinking and planning, in your original goal? And you will notice that with some people, the self-belief goes up, and that's because you've helped them think through ideas and plan through in more detail than they've done by themselves. And for some people, the self-belief will go down and diminish. And if that happens, relax, it's okay. It's perfectly natural because you will have helped that person to do some thinking, typically about some obstacles or some risks that they might not have thought of in advance of your coaching session. Now, the next thing to do then is, after you've done that check of the self-belief, Some people might need to redefine their goal, and that's okay to maybe extend the timeline or reduce the measure if their self-belief has dropped. Other people might go, well, actually, I can do it quicker. So feel relaxed if a person wants to adjust their goal at any stage. With the reason why, sometimes I don't ask the question. I just know, because I'm looking at the person, I'm listening to the person. I know that the way they answer the questions, they still really want it. But if I'm not sure, I will ask the question out loud, because what I'm doing is I'm doing the check for my own benefit as the coach. Does this person still really want it? Occasionally, and it is really, really occasionally, perhaps it might be 1 in 20 or 30 times, a person will say, you know what, it's a lot of work. I don't know if I can be bothered. In which case, that's okay. You might just have spent 20 or 30 minutes with them, but at least they haven't then wasted their time and potentially resources and energy going chasing after a goal that they really don't want. So check the reason why and the self-belief. That's step 4. Step 5, which starts with question 32, is we go back to the middle here and we ask them the closed question. Are you willing to take personal responsibility for doing those things that you've just said are important in your plan of priorities? Yes or no? All right. If the person says yes, which they typically do because they wouldn't have got this far in the coaching process, you then take them down. This is a choice line about choosing how much time they are going to spend or set aside in their busy or hectic schedules sometimes to actually do those priorities. So my question would be, how much time are you going to set aside? When are you going to set it aside? Perhaps if they've got a diary with them, or maybe their phone, or a planning calendar of some sort, I would actually get them to make a note and block out that time there and then, or put a reminder perhaps for when they go back home or wherever they go, right, to actually set some time aside. Depending on the scale of their goal, it might be a very big goal, and you might want to just ask them to think about when they will review their progress and monitor their progress as they move forward towards achieving it. So that's step 5, planning in the time, checking the personal responsibility. You'll notice on the handout, question 38, assume success in the way that it's phrased, right? And that's just about getting a person to imagine going forward and celebrating their success in a way that's appropriate for them. It might be that you've agreed to meet up or have contact with this person in the future in a couple of weeks or a month or so's time, whatever's appropriate. In that case, the final question would be, when shall we get together next? Just to review. Okay, so that's it. So quick recap for you. 5 steps. First one, internal triangle. Get the goal, the reason why, and the self-belief. Second step is to move over, do the possibility thinking, spend half of your time there. The third step, close off that triangle by asking them for the important priorities in relation to their goal. Start to build an action plan. Step 4, come over and do the check. Step 5, personal responsibility, planning in the time and how they will monitor and review their progress. So in a coaching session, you're actually doing those 6 key principles. The person then has to take responsibility, take the action for themselves, measure the results, which should of course be measurable if you've helped them get clear measures at the start.